Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Great to see some of you attendees dropping through now, and more of you joining us in the next few minutes. So just as we get started, let me just do a few words of introduction. Firstly, of course, welcome to you all. Thank you for taking the time out of your diary to come along to our webinar today on discussing data and the future of rail freight, a really interesting topic. And I know we've got some great speakers lined up and some interesting points that are going to emerge from that discussion as well. I know we're all a little bit webinar weary these days. There's been quite a lot of them, but there's always a fresh topic and a fresh perspective, and really pleased to be able to try and share some of that. So just by way of housekeeping, we will be recording this webinar. In fact, we are recording this webinar. It'll be up on our YouTube channel shortly. Hopefully be on, if not this week, then possibly into next week, as our comms lead who knows how to do YouTube is away on holiday. But we'll have it up on our YouTube channel just as quickly as we can. And if you want to have a copy of the slides from today, then please drop myself or Yvonne an email and we'll get those over to you as quickly as we can. You have got a Q&A box in front of you, so please do ask your questions in that Q&A box, and we will come to those towards the end of the webinar and try and pick up as many of those questions as we can. Please do drop those questions in. It makes for a much better discussion if all the questions aren't just coming from me. And there's going to be a lot of interesting points coming up, so please do keep those questions coming. Finally, from me, I'm in the office today, as you can see from the hideous light fitting behind me. This also means I have terrible Wi-Fi, so if the worst happens and I crash out, Yvonne is ready and waiting to take over. So Yvonne, thank you for being on standby, and if you see her coming on to do the questions instead of me, you'll know why. I think it must be something to do with the dentist downstairs doing something particularly data intensive today. Who knows what modern dentistry does. But anyway, I think most of you have joined today, so let's get started with today's topic to talk about data and what that can help to do to modernise the rail freight sector. I was reflecting on my way in this morning that it was 30 years ago that as a young student, I took a year's placement working for British Gas in their research centre. And of course, computer technology wasn't really what it was today, office Wi-Fi notwithstanding. I was given an Amstrad 8086 computer. It was pretty state of the art. As it went, although one of my office colleagues had just been given a 386 and he thought he was the bee's knees. But nonetheless, there wasn't a lot you could do with one of those, really. But what British Gas did have was they had a huge amount of data. They had a lot of data on failure modes, and we were trying to use that to model their gas compressor network and work out whether they needed more or less. Trying to do something meaningful with data back on an Amstrad 8086 had its moments. I'd like to think that we did do something meaningful, but I'm quite sure that today the state of the art for that kind of modelling is significantly better. It has to be. And I think if I skip forward to the railways, there was a long time where I would say the railways were really probably data poor if you didn't count train numbers. That was probably the full extent of what we had. And in the last 5 years, I would say people have taken measures to become, more data rich. But the question now becomes, and what are we going to do with it all? And I think that the real sweet spot for today is understanding what we can do with that data to really good impact and what that means for the future of the rail freight sector. And so let's get into the meat of it. Enough of me, and hand over to our first speaker. Our first speaker today is Mike Garrett of MDS Transmodal, who's no stranger to the rail freight. He's been on the board of Rail Freight Group for, I think, most of those last 30 years, and instrumental in taking forward work on rail freight forecasting, which has really helped to make the case for growth over those decades. But the angle that Mike's going to be taking us through today is the data that helps to underpin the work that they do, the power of that data and how they've been able to use it to better inform the future of rail freight. So Mike, thank you very much for joining us, and over to you. You're on mute, Mike.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
Good. So apologies for that. My computer story on starting work goes back to 1973. in being presented with an ICL George IV mainframe and being invited to try and make use of it. So yes, things have come on a long way. Well, my main objective today is to try to summarize some of the work we've been doing over the last 20 years to describe national freight demand, of which rail freight is a part, how to forecast rail freight volumes, but then to move on to talk about placing a value on that traffic, and then seeing how that can be taken into account when we also look at capacity. So I'll try to be as brief as possible. It's a large subject and it's been a complicated journey. We developed our GB freight model between 1990, when the Channel Tunnel was being mooted, and that was the inspiration for the model, to about 2004, when we developed it into a fully fledged domestic and international freight model. It incorporates road, rail, port, and trade data. So it hoovers up all the data we can lay our hands on. And it's driven by transport cost models for each mode, and it's sensitive to land use, i.e. the issue of rail connectivity, which has been a major driver in forecasting future volumes. Mode and route choice based on sharing between options based upon costs using a logic model, and it's calibrated to explain base year flows. So that's the sort of starting point, and we use this model for all sorts of purposes in the freight sector for public sector and private sector clients. The rail freight forecasts have been generated since about 2004. We made specific forecasts for Network Rail in 2012 and 2018. They've been revised and republished, and they're on the Network Rail website and have been there since August last year for 2023, 33, and 43. And the website's down there at the bottom of the slide here if anyone wants to check it out. The results are based on different economic growth scenarios. They take into account government assumptions on labor costs and fuel prices and so forth. And they also take into account rail asset utilization and the connectivity of rail freight to cargo, i.e. railing distribution parks or strategic rail freight interchanges. Our forecast based upon base year.
Sorry to interrupt. Have you shared your slides? Because we can't see them whilst we're watching.
Oh, I'm sorry. Right. I haven't. Well, I thought I had.
Do you want to just have another go?
Okay. Can you see them now?
No. Yvonne, could you share Mike's slides, please? We need some on-hold music just temporarily. I'm not planning to sing them.
Sure.
There we go. Lovely. Thanks, Yvonne.
Okay. So apologies about that. Right, I'm on slide 2. Right. Just to summarize the results, the central scenario results based on a base year of 2016-17 were for 46% growth in rail ton kilometers by 2033, 90% by 2043, based upon a whole range of drivers, including changes in rail connectivity, train length, asset utilization, and so forth. But the crucial point to make here is that those are based on unconstrained capacity, or rather assuming the same amount of capacity, relatively speaking, is available as it is today. And the website on which these results are all stored are shown at the bottom of the screen there. So next slide, please. So this is a quick graphic of what those forecasts look like and showing where the extra freight is going to, is forecast. And you can see that it's principally along the main north-south routes, which is no surprise. A few declines, which is shown as red dotted lines, bearing in mind that in 2016 there was still more coal traffic than there is today, and that will have gone. So that's our basic position as it were, last year. So next slide, please. We were also asked by Network Rail to route this traffic, and that's also on that website. That's because it's all very well to forecast the origin and destination of trains in the future, but if Network Rail is going to be able to associate that demand with the network itself, you have to decide which way it's going to be routed. So the extra, as it were, element of that work was to look at existing routing and then to move forward to how the additional flows would be routed in the future. And the output, again, if you look at the Network Rail website, is available as trains and paths and so forth assigned to the network. So next slide, please. This is an example of that, and it shows some of the issues that arise, of course, when you have alternative routes. So this is the most obvious alternative route available on the network between Felixstowe and the Midlands and the North, where the traffic can go through London or through across East Anglia. And it also introduces another option in the long-term future, which is, could this route use East-West Rail? So the routing study sort of tries to take all that on board. You can see why East-West Rail would have some value there. So next slide, please. Now, now kind of our new work, if you like. The way the model works is it calculates the user cost by road or rail or other modes, maritime modes as well, but we're talking about road versus rail here. And that means that you can determine the benefit that the user enjoys by using rail. So you move your forecast forward and you can see the value of those trains versus the next best alternative being road, and see some benefit that the user enjoys by using rail. The diversion of that traffic to road would impose non-user costs, i.e. the same kind of calculation system that's used to determine mode shift revenue grants at the moment, and it goes through the DFT evaluation system to make sure it's compliant. So if you suppress traffic, not only do users suffer because they have to use road instead of rail, but also non-users suffer because there's more HGVs going past their front door. So you can then sum those and determine the value of each train. The approach we take is at the train level. It's actually at the ton level and then the train level. So we can actually place a value on each train movement, present and future, which provides us with a tool for evaluation, or appraisal. So next slide, please. Now, that's all well and good, but you can't really work out what the worth of that value is, or in terms of network capacity, unless you can work out what the capacity of the network is as well. So what we've also developed is a methodology for determining network capacity, not at the, as it were, timetabling level, but by adopting other measures, such as the mix of train speeds, conflicting movements at junctions, and so on and so forth. And in that respect, we followed the thinking in quite a useful document, which I've identified at the bottom there, which is an EU research document written about 5 years ago, which basically appraises different ways of doing strategic network capacity across Europe, and how different people have looked at different ways of doing these things. We've tried to absorb that based upon the data which is available to us, which is basically network rail billing data and the our own road and rail networks that we've developed over the years, as it were, computerized networks. So what we've tried to do is to determine the value of each freight path, and then we move forward to determining the capacity of the network. So next slide, please. In doing that, of course, we've had to take into account passenger demand. So, because passenger demand dominates the network. So we put all of the passenger trains onto the network as well, added to the freight trains, calibrated according to existing conditions, and then we've got the means whereby we can test whether further trains are likely to fit. If we go to the next slide, please. This is a big picture summary of what that looks like. So this is looking at our 2033 forecasts. It compares the passenger and freight trains we are forecasting then, using, as it were, forecast passenger train services as well. And what then pops out is the freight paths which would otherwise be suppressed if that's the only capacity available. And that's what we can then multiply by their values, their user and non-user values, and arrive at some conclusion as to what the total value of rail freight is, in terms of just user and non-user costs, and secondly, the impact of not having enough capacity to satisfy the forecast demand we're expecting. So if we can go to the next slide, please. And this is a sort of summary of that position. If we look at the user and non-user value of the trains in the 2019 base year, basically saying, what if these didn't go by rail at all? They all had to go on the road. What would that be worth? And we work out a user value and a non-user value based upon what should we say, tag compliant values, which we've discussed with the DFT. Indeed, the DFT is one of our clients in this respect. And we arrive at a total value of rail freight of £732 million per annum, a value per ton kilometre by rail of 3.9 pence, i.e. that's what rail freight in those terms is worth. Now, this is not the same as was arrived at in the Deloitte study, which introduced lots of other rail freight advantages, such as if rail freight wasn't there, then different industries might not exist, but a much wider kind of point. I'm not trying to address that. I'm just sticking to the knitting, if you like, of what the TAG team would take into account. In 2033, partly because of the extra passenger trains, if there are no further network interventions, we would forecast a 42% increase in train kilometres. However, introduce this constraint, and you saw from the previous map that those constraints are in very specific places, really. Northern West Coast Main Line, through Derbyshire and so forth. we would only be able to fit in 14%. What the loss of benefit per train kilometre suppressed on average was £26, and the loss of value through lack of daytime capacity, or assuming the nighttime trains run anyway because the space, we arrived at £175 million. So that's the kind of number crunch that you can work through from this kind of big picture forecasting, looking at capacity, working out a way of valuing rail freight, and you end up with a number which can be used for evaluation or appraisal purposes. So last slide now, please. So we've applied this approach to port clients, subnational transport authorities, and the DFT. The methodology has also been applied to a big EU transport model we were party to constructing called Trimode. It can be used to compare with the value of passenger trains. And now that's something we're doing at the moment. And it can be used to test the impact of specific interventions, i.e. it is both granular, train by train, add a chord in, take a chord out, look what the impact would be, or it can be used to evaluate overall strategies like changing track charges, whatever. Okay, that's me done. Thank you for listening. I look forward to hearing the others. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike, and a really interesting start there because it's using data in a different way, but a nonetheless important way compared to some of the presentations we've got. So it's always interesting to have multiple angles on the same question. So thank you very much, and really interesting results there, I think, which help inform the whole rail reform agenda, which was, of course, the subject of our last webinar, and will no doubt be the subject of many more. Okay, moving on. Our next speaker, Martin Gladdow, is the Head of IT and Technical Innovation at 3 Squared, who's supported today by Peter Hicks, the Director of Open Train Times, are going to be talking about the company's new Path Planner solution, which has been developed with Rail Operations Group and Freightliner with funding from RSSB. So Martin, Peter, I think Martin, you're doing the presenting and Peter, you're doing the difficult questions or something like that, but welcome. Thank you both very much for taking the time, and over to you.
Thank you, Maggie, and thank you, everyone. It's a great presentation, Mike. Thank you for everyone who's attending. So I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully it works. If you can't see the slides, please do shout up as soon as you can. So if this is working, the screen will now be shared. Can you all see that?
Looking good.
Brilliant. Okay.
There we go. Perfect.
So let's start the presentation then. As Maggie said, I'm here on behalf of 3 Squared to talk about the work that we've been doing with Open Train Times in response to an RSSB call for innovation in the VSTP space. So 3 Squared are a company who've been around since 2002, working in the rail sector across multiple different areas of rail. We work with passenger, freight, supply chain, infrastructure, and we work in various different aspects of that. So remote condition monitoring, operations, compliance, planning, various different pieces of software basically that help to digitize processes that in rail have historically not always been as digital as they could be. And because we've been around that long, we've got quite a few mature and established pieces of software and certifications to provide that assurance to industry, like 27001 and Cyber Essentials Plus, to make sure we cover the security angle of things when working with data. This application has been built in conjunction with Open Train Times. We've worked with them for a number of years and a number of different applications. So as an organisation, they were founded in 2011 to look at railway systems and software, and as well as the public website that's used by hundreds of people every month, industry and non-industry, to visualise train movements during the day. They're also involved in many projects across the wider rail sector to try and look at improving everything collectively for rail. And the products of Open Train Times underpin a lot of other systems, such as Path Planner, that we're going to look at today. And as Maggie said, Peter, who's founding director, is on the call today and will be available to help me with any questions at the end. So VSTP process, as I'm sure many of you know, being involved in rail, is quite painful and arduous and manual, and often you're doing VSTP when you've got an immediate demand you need to fulfill, so you've not got a lot of time to tackle it. Now, some of the stats we've pulled out is that 20% of freight moves are VSTP, which puts a heavy reliance on it, and 30% of WTT paths are unused, so there is capacity that is locked up within the system. And that makes it even harder to go through the process of finding a new VSTP path for a schedule. And ultimately, what that means is that you risk missing out on opportunity to shift some freight to rail, and it means you can't be responsive to your customers. So there's lost opportunity there as well. So Path Planner has been put together to be a digital solution for the management and coordination of VSTP requests. These are traditionally done in a variety of different systems. There's no overall solution to it in the industry. And quite often it's just a case of, let's see if we can submit this one that worked last time and see if that gets what we need. So we're looking to pull together the historic network data from Open Train Times that has got all the schedules and all the movement data to them that are being analysed through a complex process to give us an idea of utilisation rates of various different schedules. So to begin with, we worked with Rail Operations Group and Freightliner, as Maggie has mentioned, to understand what the business need is and how the process works in these existing organisations. And Freightliner and ROG are quite different as organisations go, with different demands for their business. So it's been really useful to get more than one angle on VSTP for this application. We've mapped out the process and we've looked for areas where there might be pain points and there might be heavy manual work such as rekeying or anything like that, and looked at where there are opportunities for us to do something innovative there without requiring massive business change. So we've got a lot of information on this slide. I'm not going to talk about all of it because reading out slides isn't normally the right way to go about things. But generally what we do is we allow you to give us the parameters for your path, so where you're going from and to, any restrictions you've got on there, and present you with a number of schedules that may not be being used, and we'll put a percentage against that based on historical trends, and allow you to visualize that on a train graph so you can see if that fits with your demands. And it allows you to generate a timed bid to submit to Network Rail, which has less chance of being rejected because it's based on an existing path, and it means that at Network Rail all we have to do is check whether that path is actually being used that day, and if so, they can approve it. They've already got the timing, so don't have to go through all of the manual process of verifying that. And it means that the quality of the bid submission and the quality of the path that's returned should be higher. So one of the metrics we're looking at on this is what is the success rate for it in terms of bids that are accepted and paths that were viable paths when they were run by the operator. And it also allows an operator to see of their own schedules what opportunity they have to unlock capacity they've got locked up in paths for them. But one of the things we'd like to see is cross-industry collaboration with this information as well. So there's an ability for an operator to go, I'm not planning, I'll mark them within Path Planner as available for other parties in the freight sector to reuse for rail freight. So protecting those paths so they still maintain freight capacity on the network. And we've got some future ideas that we'd like to do with this as well. So as I said, we've built it so we're not requiring a huge amount of business change. One of the key things for us is we know that the people who are accepting these bids at Network Rail are exceedingly busy. So we wanted to provide them with information that was familiar for them and fits with their existing working process. But we are in conversations with Network Rail about how we can get deeper integration with their train planning systems. And that is both for the couple of days in advance VSTP, where you'd be going into TPS to get the information, but also when you're dealing with on-the-day VSTP requests, which at the moment are often just keyed directly into Trust. And we want to make sure we've got better quality information to identify availability of paths. So one of the things that we're in conversation with, and I've got a meeting on Friday about, is making sure that we can get possession information out of the Network Rail systems in a digital format that is suitable for use in a structured data rather than optimized towards human usage. and to make sure that, as well as showing what the scheduled movements are on the train graph, if you are planning on the day, you can see if there are any services that are running ahead or behind, and where things like Darwin might be indicating potential changes to services, to make sure that information is available. And finally, to look to get the schedule export from the system into PEX format, so it is interoperable with other systems as well. So we've put together a bit of a user flow for the system, but I don't really want to run through a flow diagram. So what I'm going to do instead, and I'm going to have to stop sharing and then share again for this, so bear with me, is run through a live demonstration of the application. So I can get this to work. You should all now be seeing the Path Planner dashboard. So unless anyone says otherwise, I'm going to assume we are and carry on through the system. So as you can see, this web browser doesn't require any special hardware installed in any location that's going to use it. So the flow through the system will start with a path search. So if we want to go from, say, Sheffield, purely because that's where I'm sat today, and we want to go to Manchester Piccadilly, we'll stick that in there. Obviously, it's not really a freight route, but they are convenience stations, and I know they work, which is why I'm picking them. You also have the option here, if you want, to route via a specific location, or don't route via a specific location, if you know there are restrictions, or if you've got anywhere that you specifically need to go for operational reasons. So you can choose your preferred date and time for departure. We'll go for now, see what's available. So if I pick that, we'll go 12:31, there we go. And then there's the other parameters that you can put in that specify your train. Full disclosure, I'm not a train planner, so if these numbers do not make any sense, please don't worry. You know, in real world usage, they'd be real world data. This is just so we can run the search for a path. Okay, and yeah, obviously I actually need to search for something in the future. So let's go for something that's in an hour's time. So if we hit search on that, what we will get back, initially it says no records to display. That's because there are no paths that the system has marked as being available to us today. Instead, we'll go, let's look at all paths. Now this is because the implementation of the system to generate full availability isn't quite in place yet. This is, as I said, a system that is in progress. So you can see here, the response that's come back is part of a path that goes all the way from Norwich to Liverpool Lime Street, but it does include in the middle Sheffield to Manchester Piccadilly as a viable option for the path. So we can hit request on that to request the path. And you can see the train graph that is pulled up here shows you the movements that are going on within the service. So you can see that there is the clear path through here. You've got any potential points of conflicts, such as at Chinley there, but this is a valid path, so it will go all the way through. The other thing that you have the ability to do at this point is, if you know that you're going to need to add a crew stop somewhere along the way, we can pop that in and go at Stockport, we'll have a 5-minute crew stop. When you put that in, you will see that it updates on your train graph that you've now got that 5-minute stop in there, and you can see that this service here is going to be overlapping that. So you might decide you want to remove that, take it out again, and we'll just use the path as was. When you hit request path on that, you will get prompted for a few of the additional details that are needed to submit this. So it tells you what schedule it's using. So we'll just pop in some details here. This is all the information that would need to go to Network Rail so they can get in touch with you when you're putting your requests through. Again, I'm only putting dummy data in here. If it's nonsensical, I work in IT. This is not my normal job. So let's put them in there and get that in. So as long as we have every field that we need filled in, we will be able to submit that. For now, I'm just going to send that to myself because I don't want anyone to actually try and run this train. We will submit that request. And you see there, you get the bid details come through for the timed bid that will go in with all the additional information. This is generated as a PDF that you can download, and that will get emailed to Network Rail, and they can approve through, at the moment, their normal approval processes. So if you look in the bid section of the application, you can either see the ones you put yourself or any your organisation have put in. You can see that there's this one I did earlier as a test is now showing a status of expired because the departure date is in the path. This one is showing as sent, and you can view the details on it from. You can add some notes to it if you've got any operational notes you want to add to it. And when from Network Rail you get back that they've accepted it, you can update it in the system to show that it has been accepted. That is now a path that has gone through your path planning process. In the future, that will hopefully be an automatic system. We're hoping to get Network Rail using the web application to send the approval messages back to you, but also ultimately to integrate into train planning systems so that it is a fully integrated end-to-end service. I was just going to mention, actually, I skipped through it here. There is also the departure board here, which shows you live running information for your company. So if we look at trains that are en route, we can see we've got one here that's set out from Crew. If we hit details on there, you can see plan versus actual detail for it. You can see that you've got a 4-minute lateness there. So that's just another view you can get on your business operation. And the last bit I wanted to cover, which is very much in flight at the moment, is this schedules section. So here we've got all the schedules that are known for the organisation. So if we pick one of them, say 3 Quebec 9-1 here, you can see that this is booked on the 8th and 9th of July. It is in your company's plan. So you can mark it as not required. That only marks it as not required within Path Planner at this point. It's not got integration into train planning. But what that means is if some other operator needs to run a service that runs from Ormslow to Crewe on this day, that service would show up within Path Planner as being a service that was available for them to reuse the schedule from. So that's a brief overview of what goes on within Path Planner. I'm going to jump back to my slides now. Okay, so important next question really from here, time for a demo, already covered that bit, is what are we doing next? So this application is in trial with the Northwest, the Western and the Rugby control centres. So we've got Network Rail wanting to work with our freight operators on this system. We are discussing future integrations and features with partners. I've mentioned some of those as we've been going along through the presentation today. And we are interested from any other parties who want to be involved in this, from evaluating the Path Planner application in terms of doing VSTP for your purposes, or if you've got any more general questions about the application and what it potentially could do, any other integrations you think could be useful, please get in touch with James Fox. That's james.fox@3squared.com. He is our commercial director and one of the founders of 3 Squared, and he's handling all the customer relationship on this application. So if you've got any questions, as Maggie said, please put them in the Q&A box. I can see there's a couple of things that have gone in already. And time, get in touch with me on LinkedIn, on social media, or email James, and we can answer any questions that way as well. And thank you for listening. I'm looking forward to the next presentation.
Thank you very much, Martin. Really, really good to see a demonstration of that. You know, we've seen it from, you know, the original RSSB bid round and through now into actually something you can touch and feel. It's brilliant. Really, really good to see that. So thank you for sharing that. And as you say, some questions coming in, so do keep them coming. But let's move on now to our final presentation. Just in terms of question in the chat there, just send an email to Yvonne or myself, Andre, and we will send the slide pack out to you later on. Yvonne at rfg.org.uk or to myself, Maggie at rfg.org.uk. I'll type them in the chat in a moment. But our final speaker today, Mark Gasby, a director at Fishbone Solutions, is going to be talking to us about leveraging a data-driven approach and with a particular focus on some of the projects that they've been taking through in the freight space. So Mark, thank you very much for joining us today, and over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Maggie. Can I just check that everybody can see that? It should be coming up now.
We can see it now, thank you.
Perfect. Is that full screen?
Not yet.
There we go.
There's now. Perfect.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for having me on today. Just a quick disclaimer. I'm standing in today for one of our innovation team experts who's unfortunately on a family funeral. So I'd be happy to take away any questions that I can't answer today and get back to you. But let's dive into this, and I think there's some it plays on some themes that have already been discussed, which is quite interesting in itself. A quick one about Fishbone, formed in 2012. We're a transportation solutions consultancy and engineering company, which means that we work in the rail space, automotive and other related transportation sector businesses. And we provide a suite of bespoke engineering services as well as products and solutions. And we think of innovation as something that is another business development line in everything that we do. And hopefully you'll see that in some of the slides that show us what we're doing across the freight sector with data. Didn't want to dwell on this one too much, but just to provide everyone with a sort of an idea of the spaces that we've played in over the last 9 years within the freight industry. So we've got a lot of experience of freight operations itself. In fact, right across to actually building rails and getting materials there to be able to build railways, i.e. HS2. We've done a lot of work on assurance, project management, supporting customers in bringing new products to market and getting them running, and also the sort of more traditional engineering support elements in design and bringing new wagons into play. And most recently, data analytics. So we're looking at RCM solutions for the freight world. The presentation today is sort of looking at 3 themes. 2 I think we've already kind of looked at already. Those are the 3 initiatives. We're kind of involved in a few think tanks with Network Rail, with the DFT and with the Rail Operations Group. We're involved in taking these forward, both at a sort of consultancy level, but also at developing some of the tool sets around some of these initiatives. So the first one that we wanted to talk about is Headcode valuation. I think this really sort of ties in a little bit with what Mike was saying in the first presentation. And I think one of the themes is freight's value to the UK rail network, possibly on the rise, especially sort of in the COVID timeframe and post-COVID. And so what we're looking at here is evaluating the economic benefit provided by each train on the UK rail network, and to change the current operational prioritizations of services in the timetable in real time. And this would ensure that the most important services, and we're obviously talking freight here, are prioritized for both capacity and performance purposes. And the valuation wouldn't just consider the economic benefits of the payload, but also social and environmental impacts. And why is this important? Well, it's a lot more difficult to restart a freight train after its routing may have changed or timetable may have changed, particularly from a power draw perspective. So by limiting the events that could change that timetable has a cost as well as an environmental impact reduction. And also increasing the confidence in the UK railway network's ability to secure prompt arrival of freight deliveries. And, you know, if we're thinking about heading for a sort of delivery on the day kind of Amazon kind of delivery style supported by the UK rail network, then we'd certainly need to consider that. What needs to be considered then? Consideration of prioritization of freight in the current timetabling process. Freight industry needs to be able to utilize current line speed limits, potential usage of HS2 route for freight, and consolidation of freight operation management systems. And I think that ties into some of the things that Martin and Mike have already said. What are we doing in this area? We're working with a collaboration partner and the rail freight operations groups to develop the thought processes and the solutions to tackle these points. And the potential benefits then: modernising route planning, reducing the power draw of stop-starting freight services, real-time clear maps depicting actual usage of the rail infrastructure, and predictive demand forecasting is therefore made possible. So that was initiative number 1. The next one that we're involved in is the predictive demand forecasting. So why? Well, traditional freight companies have an annual freight plan, could theoretically use this to predict freight demand on the network, but this doesn't consider STP and VSTP planning. So we need to update the industry systems to account for real-time usage fluctuations. And why? Well, I think Martin's already demonstrated that. But capacity can then be measured against future demand rather than lagging to calculate the required level of performance. And we can adjust those performance plans in real time to set operations and maintenance plans, importantly, in line with perceived levels of risk. I think there's a map that we might have seen already. What needs to be considered? The industry currently mainly considers lagging measures of demand. Consideration needs to be made on how to supplement this with forward planning. Usage of potential joint venture partners such as Amazon Logistics, same-day deliveries could be offered by the industry on the rail network. What are we doing? Fishbone, we're collaborating with a UK freight company and Network Rail Route to develop a freight demand forecasting solution. The proposed benefits are obviously innovation through collaboration, as opposed to purely data-driven approaches, accounting for real-world usage fluctuations, and to produce realistic operations plans and maximising the available capacity on the rail network itself. And finally, a sort of not totally data initiative here, but data-related, kind of cuts across other discussions that we're having within the freight industry, and this is around sustainability initiatives and some of the things that we're doing, and centered around 3 areas: the economic, supplemented by the Headcode valuation work that we're doing, the predictive demand forecasting. We're looking at the environmental impact and the initiatives around that, including hydrogen fuel usage, collaborative centralized renewable energy for the rail industry, and some of the social elements as well, and some of the things that we've done here to look at the social elements, how the rail network is used, and how it's maintained, and making sure that's a safe at all times, zero risk environment. So there's some of the initiatives that Fishbone are looking at the moment. Be happy to talk through in a bit more detail, either within or outside of this forum. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, Mark. Thank you. Do you want to just drop your slides for me? Brilliant. Perfect. Thank you. So 3 really interesting presentations there, and as ever with the best webinars in the world, both overlapping, circular and distinct. So that's what we like. When you put these webinars together, you are, you never really know where you're going to end up, but it's brilliant that happens, and as it so often does. Right, so we've got about 10 minutes for questions and a few questions coming in, but let me start with a couple as chair's prerogative. Let me do that. We've all talked a lot about, programs and projects which rely on and interface with data that comes in and out of Network Rail. And, what I've seen over the last few years is really brilliant progress in Network Rail's interest in talking to people about that, and, commitment to doing better. But, is Network Rail's data up to scratch? Is this holding us back? And how does their timetable strategy work interface with the kind of commercial facing products that you guys are working on? Perhaps an unfair question, but does anyone want to have a go at that?
Oh, I mean, I can certainly contribute to that one. And yes, I think it's fair to say that the data within Network Rail isn't as accessible as it could be, and it's not as well structured as it could be. So one of the problems that I touched on that we face is things like possession information and ones and bonds and everything like that. They're human optimized, they're not machine optimized. But I think it is recognised within Network Rail that data is valuable and that there is stuff that they can be doing to work better with industry. And I think some of the intent that is seen coming out, things like William Shapps as well, shows that everyone's looking in the right direction. You've got things, obviously, like RSSB's rail technical strategy as well. And from the inside Network Rail point of view, you've got I've forgotten his name now, CIO of Network Rail is very much behind data. And you can see from things like Jacqueline Young's done on the Intelligent Infrastructure Programme that they understand the value of data. They understand how that can work across the industry. The thing I've not really seen yet is how that works with the supply chain, because I find that the Network Rail commercials and procurement approach is very disjointed from the information and data point of view.
Yeah, thank you. Because I think there's some terrific work being done. You're the STP planner. I know Liam was on earlier, who's been doing the NR Plus program. And all of these are really moving that dial along, and and that's brilliant. But what we need to do for that is to integrate it and not compensate, I think, for those weaknesses. Let me just steal one more question, if I might, around possession planning, because you mentioned that, Martin. Yep. Is the sort of techniques that you've got in Path Planner, would they, one of the things that I find on possessions is, and this has been going back for 30 years, that life would be a lot better if only possessions were taken overnight, during the day, at weekends, for long blockades, for shorter times. If freight got out the way, if passengers didn't want to travel on Sundays, the world would be better. And actually, from a freight point of view, all I care is that the train runs. I don't really care when they take the possession. So do you think there's a role for your software in trying to help with the, what I think the answer is, which is just keep the train running, divert it effectively, and then take the possession? Can that be made? And can that be made circular, so that when people think about how they schedule those possessions, they understand that diversionary point?
But that would be a really interesting challenge that we'd love to get involved in, is to turn it on its head and look at it backwards and go, right, these are all the trains. How do we plan in the possessions, and how do we divert trains around them? Obviously, what we're trying to do is not get too carried away with everything that the system could do, because we want to deliver something and see the value in it and iterate over that. But yeah, I think more connected data for possession planning is key to maintaining capacity of an ever crowded railway.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, let me turn to some of the questions that have come in, and do keep them coming. Question from Mike here. It's a detailed question, Mike, but I know that you'll know. Why does the known congestion spot of Soame to Ely not show up on the map? It's part one. And part two, how do changing factors such as HGV shortages get reflected into GBFM and the forecasts that come from it?
Okay, I'll do the second first. The HGV shortages means road haulage becoming more expensive. So it will be a relatively straightforward matter to rerun the model with higher haulage costs, because basically truck drivers are now being paid more. So that's very straightforward. As far as, I'm not quite sure which map was being looked at there with respect to Ely. Ely is definitely a problem. The way we've been modeling capacity, though, is that you take into account all the pinch points along a route. You then identify where the worst pinch point is, you take those trains away, and you do it successively by iteration. So the way it shows in any particular map may not be so obvious, i.e. if something else along the route kind of got there before Ely, then Ely doesn't show. So, but all these things can be, as you were, tested by simply adding and taking away pinch points to see where the next worst point is on the route.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, question came in. It actually came in about Path Planner, but I think it's also relevant, Mark, to your Headcode optimization project as well, about how we can use this technology not just to look at where paths are, but to work out the carbon emissions and look around regulation. Mark, is that something that your work on Headcode or I can't remember your title of it, but Headcode validation, that's in that sort of space, isn't it? Looking at how we can better get the carbon emissions into the thinking. You're on mute, Mark.
Thanks, Maggie. Not the first time I've done that today. No, I 100% agree with that, and it is part of it. I think where we're coming from is trying to sort of uplift the, for want of a better word, the importance, the value of freight going forward, and how potentially we could use the Headcode to do that, and it to be relatively straightforward. If anybody knows what the Headcode looks like, it's 4 digits, but it does right on the front of it identify what type of train is coming down the line, and you could very easily use that to put a valuation on the payload, i.e. the asset that's going to be running down the train, and make all of the necessary adjustments on the timetable and the route to accommodate that. And so, yeah, a secondary output of that could well be carbon efficiencies.
Yeah. It's a bit like a green number plate, really.
That's the one.
Yeah, interesting. And Martin and Peter, is that something that you could wind into a sort of a path planner type system, do you think?
And Peter, I think you've got an answer for some of this, haven't you?
Yeah, so my take on it is it's an interesting use case trying to optimize the path to minimize conflicts and freight trains being regulated to a stand. My view is that probably falls into the realm of a driver advisory system rather than planning system, because with all the will in the world, you can plan according to the train planning rules. They might not be right. I think it would be better to have that done in real time and advising a driver to go slow and take account of the network conditions at the time, rather than trying to plan it in advance. But there probably is, there may be ways to use a slower path to reduce carbon emissions. So yeah, it's possibly something Path Planner can help with.
Yeah, no, I think just to...
Yeah, so it sounds like the technology can do it. It's finding the right place. I mean, I think, in terms of driver behaviour, you're absolutely right. The driver advisory is the place to go. I think there's some interesting thinking about which freight train gets put into a loop. Do you loop the freight and let the passenger go, or hold up the passenger for 2 minutes and let the freight go? And some interesting choices around that, which are a mixture of, I think, technology and politics, but there we go. We've got a couple of quick ones before we finish. And I think, so Liam's asked a question about how train planning rules and network capability are taken into account in Path Planner. I think you sort of partly showed us that with the gauge and route availability tags on the system, but is there anything else you wanted to add on that?
I'll probably take this one. So at the moment, we're just looking at what we're calling grey space, which is underutilized existing path on the network. So we're not looking at the section running times and the train planning rules. We're saying here's a path on the network valid for this, let somebody else use it. When we move to white space planning, which we really want to do, when there's a network rail assured model of the network available, that they will say, yep, you can plan against this, and we will go along with the output of it. Then yes, we'll take in train planning rules, junction margins, and the network capability into account.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. And then the last one I've got, have the findings and observations you've outlined on Network Rail data been shared with Network Rail? I mean, I'm guessing the answer to that is yes.
Yeah, when you say have they been shared with Network Rail, they've been shared with some people at Network Rail who have some responsibility for some areas of it. But as you can imagine, it's a big problem, and it is a mixture of both technology and politics. So it's a case of all of us as an industry really making sure that we talk to the contacts we have within Network Rail about the challenges that we face and the opportunities we see to make sure that across industry the potential benefits are seen and realised.
Yeah, Perfect. And I agree. And I think, we've made such huge progress on, bringing this to the forefront of rail freight in the last few years. And, the kind of schemes that we've heard about today, and the next stages of prototyping and the competition funding that was announced recently, and, RSSB putting competitions out to the market still. It's all, really great at bringing that forward and bringing that on. And, the freight train of today looks different to the freight train that looks the same, but it's, much more enabled, and the one beyond that will be more so too. And just a comment in the panel, in the chat comment, RSSB is shaping up a research project on freight regulation. RSSB code there, T1263. We all have a good RSSB code number. Tools and guidance for efficient timetabling of freight trains, and it would be good to have a chat. That's in from Robert Staunton at RSSB, who I'm sure you all know, who's leading on freight research. So do have a look out for that one. I've seen the remit of it, and I'd already made a note to mention it to you both, but you also definitely want to look out for, because there's something in that space coming out soon. Brilliant. Look, we are 1 minute over time, and I don't go over time as a matter of policy. So let me just bring matters to a close by saying a huge thank you to Mike, to Martin, to Peter and to Mike for speaking to us today. Some really, really interesting thoughts and innovations. Lots of notes that I've written to follow up on, and I will be doing on some of those projects and what we can do to support that going forwards. Particularly the point that Robert's made there, do have a look for that. And Mark, on your sustainability map, I think with COP26 looming, that's something we again we'll have a chat about and see whether we can do some more around those themes as we come into the autumn. And it just comes to me then to thank you all for joining today. Do drop us an email if you want the slides. We'll have the recording up just as soon as we can. And I think we have one more webinar before we all dive off on our holidays on the 20th of July, where Eversholt Rail are going to be talking to us about their freight multiple unit, which they launched last week, their Swift project. So that's coming up on the 20th of July. It's on the website if you want to get yourself booked onto that, and then we let you have a well-deserved rest over the summer where you don't have to learn about anything new for a few weeks, and we'll be back in the autumn. But thank you all very much for joining us today. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon and see you again soon. Thank you now.